Good morning, everyone. I'm Ginny Wise, Tulane's Vice President for Advancement, and I'm thrilled that you are all joining us today for our fourth plugin event. Plugins give us a chance to learn the newest emerging information related to the COVID crisis from some of the world's foremost experts, and all through a Tulane lens. This week, we'll have a chance to learn from Patrick Bordnick, Dean of the School of Social Work, and two of his colleagues, Dr. Tonya Hansel and Dr. Maurya Glaude. Dean Bordnick has pioneered the use of virtual reality in his field and is continuing to examine ways this innovative technology can empower people to make long-term changes in their health and well-being. Dr. Hansel is an associate professor of social work and the director for Tulane's Doctorate of Social Work program. Dr. Glaude is a licensed and board-certified clinical social worker, the associate director of Tulane's Field Education program, and a professor of practice. Before we get started, just a few pointers. While all viewers are muted, we do want to hear from you. So please enter any questions you might have in Zoom's chat function. For those of you who are using computers, you can find the chat function at the bottom of the screen. And if you're using an iPad, the chat function can be found within the participants window at the top of your screen. Dean Bordnick, Dr. Hansel, and Dr. Glaude, welcome. We look forward to hearing from each of you on today's timely and critical topic, self-care and managing well-being during uncertain times. Dean Bordnick, I will pass the virtual microphone over to you to get us started.
The joys of working at home, talking with having to mute and unmute myself, although in person, I think sometimes people want to mute each other. So they're learning an important lesson. But yeah, interesting. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're at around the world, across the country. Wanted to put together, working with Ginny's office, a panel of folks that could answer questions, provide information. A lot of it's things that everybody has, so please ask whatever questions, if there's fears, if there's anxieties, if there's stressors. If we don't know the answer on this panel, we can try to provide you the right link or places to go. But we really wanted to have basically a discussion, tell you some things we know, and Ginny's going to lead us through some questions. Common ones that we get all the time, pre and post and during disasters. All of us have worked on this panel, different types of disasters or crises events. So you've got a good group of folks here that I'm humbled to be with. They're colleagues that I look up to. So why don't we get started, Jenny?
Sounds terrific. So if folks please do feel free to put any questions in the chat function, and we've got a few here to start with. I know that that there is a lot of concern because we've had great turnout. What do you think stress looks like for most people during a time such as this?
So, well, I'll start and then we'll just kind of go, all of us. I think you can see it manifest in different ways, just natural things, people being on edge. I went to the grocery store yesterday. I'm not a huge fan of going to the grocery shopping anyways, but having to wear a mask and think about gloves, and then coming around an aisle, I turned the corner and this person was about 10 feet away from me and they jumped. I mean, that is just not what we should be experiencing, but we are experiencing, and it's completely normal because there's just an unknown of what's going on. So everything tends to put us in that state right now. It's this fear of the unknown, and I'll let Maurya and Tonya share some of their insights.
I also think we have to be mindful that some of us may have lived through other disasters here in the area, such as Hurricane Katrina, Gustav, Ike, Rita. And so therefore we may be wired a little differently, and our thermometers have different capacities for levels of stress. So we are conscientious and mindful and aware that previous stress may trigger some of the feelings we're feeling now and may make them even more prevalent during the unknowns of the current pandemic.
Dr. Hansel, anything to add?
Yeah, I think that we should also expect that these are going to be ups and downs. Like some days you might feel like you're really competent and you're doing well with the situation, and then other days you might feel really crummy. And that's kind of stress, you know, and the ebb and flow of kind of how this this disaster is playing out.
You know, one of the questions we just got is something that was on my mind from something that Dr. Glaude just said, which is this is a different type of crisis, that Hurricane Katrina happened and then there was a reaction, and this one isn't as fast moving, this crisis. So does that change people's reactions or how we should be preparing ourselves?
Well, I think so. And I'll share sort of an interesting example. And I use a lot of personal examples because people expect us to be sort of bulletproof in this situation. But you guys are experts in this. 2 Saturdays ago, I remember it was a beautiful day, just like it is today in New Orleans. And I walked outside and I was on my porch with a cup of coffee. And I'm like, oh, wow, what a great day. It's spring. It's not humid yet. And then I looked across the street and saw 2 of my neighbors sitting on opposite sides of the sidewalk, talking to each other, and it just hit me, and I wasn't expecting it. It was just like, oh my gosh, the pandemic. So I go from on one feeling appreciating a great beautiful day to all of a sudden being grounded, like, wow, we are in a state of crisis in the world. And literally it shook me up, and I was not expecting that because I just have been sort of in, you know, go mode the whole time. But I think expect things like that to happen and know that it's very normal. And I came in and I'll tell you, people talk about getting angry or whatever. I rarely get angry outside the house, you know, just by myself. I'll do yoga or run or something. I went into the bedroom and just let out a scream because I just was like, I needed to just say, I am upset, I'm angry, not at anything in particular, but it was like a beautiful day was taken away from me, you know, for something I couldn't control. But I think that's a pretty normal reaction that people should experience and give themselves time. And also feel free to talk about it with your family. If you're mad, talk about being mad. This is not a great time to be sitting in your house trying to figure out how to do a Zoom call without a dog barking or, you know, something happening behind you in the background.
Yeah, and I think the really what's playing into a lot of this is, as the question really stated, was, you know, we don't know, and that uncertainty is what's different than some of the past disasters we have. I think it's more in line with the oil spill, even though that was with much smaller populations. But that kind of unknowing of when will we get back to work? When will things get back to normal? Will they get back to normal? And that's really what's weighing on people right now. And that's where I see a lot of the concern and like Dean Bordnick said, kind of in my own personal life, kind of where my ups and downs come from.
We did get a question, and so I think it's a nice little slant on what y'all are talking about. What do you recommend for preteens and teens during these times? We ask a lot from our youth in being resilient, but how do you keep the positivity going after experiencing hurricanes and earthquakes and now COVID-19?
Well, they're teens. Be nice to your parents first and foremost. I have 3 teenage daughters, 15 through 17, and I'm actually, I want to say I'm a terrific parent, but I know it's got to be something else that's had them to be the way they are. They're very resilient. Kids are very resilient, and we talk about things. We talk about, you know, washing our hands, all the things, and are realistic with them and share that I don't know. You know, when's this going to end? I said, I really don't know. I can't answer that. I said, however, we're going to do these things to ensure we are safe as best as we can. Or, you know, one of them hasn't asked, but I had a friend's teen ask them, well, what happens if you get COVID and die? Well, if they're hearing things from their friends, or if they were to watch the news, which I don't recommend doing, and it creates a fear sense. And my friend just said, yeah, that could happen. However, the likelihood is not what you would think based on what you're seeing or hearing. I think just having an honest conversation with kids, they tend to respond very well, more so than we think. And even if they've had previous disaster experience, acknowledge that, ground back into, you know, I went through, when my daughters were infants, we went through SARS way back when. And so we kind of talked about when you were an infant, SARS was around and all of the things that happened. And so I think it's really just grounding them, but being honest. And if you don't know the answer, you know, we're expected to have all the answers as parents, but I can tell you, I sure in the heck don't. And just let them know that.
I think also building on what the dean shared, being flexible, understanding developmentally that these teenagers need access to their peers. So being flexible with allowing time with peers through all of the resources that they have available, having the ability to set the boundaries and using this time for family time. I think there was actually a question also in the chat that asked about how do you set boundaries with using technology. So allowing them to have access to their peers, allowing them to have the flexibility to engage with their peers because developmentally that's appropriate, and saying, okay, you know, we're gonna build upon this time and use it for family time. What are some games you all want to play? Let's take a walk together. Let's take a ride together. So continuing to set some boundaries and providing that core element of the parents setting the limits and setting some expectations and setting some predictability for the youth, and also allowing the flexibility of having access to their friends. So there's no set recipe for it. Every family is different. Having the flexibility, I think, is key, and understanding developmentally that they need access to their peers as creatively as you can allow that during these times of self-quarantining.
One of the questions I think is a important one, because there are people who live alone. So just to get to the other side, some of us are dealing with family units on top of each other, and some are people living alone. So how do you recommend someone who is quarantined by themselves handle that?
Well, you want to make sure that you're living alone, but you're not keeping yourself alone, that you're reaching out virtually, that you're going on walks if you're healthy and able to do that, and then connecting in ways that may be different, but that you're still connecting with other people. Maybe join a group. There are a lot of virtual online groups, and really we have a lot more opportunities now because of the pandemic for people that do live alone to reach out and connect with others.
And you'll see that it's interesting. I've made it a point, at least every day or every other day, of just trying to either Zoom or Skype or whatever you use, or just call someone that's in my contact list. It's not a best friend, it's something, just to reach out. It's an odd thing to do, but every time I've done it, they're like, oh, wow, it was great to hear from you. And they go on it. Next thing you know, an hour's gone, which is good because I know they needed that. And selfishly, I did too. And it just made a connection, and people that are by themselves or have family, just because you're surrounded with people, there's a huge other stressor of being surrounded by family, locked into a house, especially. It reminds me of the old, the show, The Odd Couple, right? You know, we're used to moving and being around and having kids and grandparents or parents, and I'm hearing of all families that is sort of compounded together, you know, multi-generations. That may sound great being surrounded by people, but it has its own set of challenges as well.
Dean Bordnick, I know the school has a wonderful resource through your website. So I don't know if this is a time or at some point, do you want to share that with everyone? Because we will get to as many of these questions as possible, but it might be nice for them to know of that.
Sure. So one of the things, I'll sort of call myself out on one of these things. The term is self-care, and we always talk about self-care and what are we doing, you know, practice self-care. Usually hear clinicians, because obviously we hear and we're dealing, you know, people usually come to us when they're not happy and, you know, everything's running great. It's usually when there's crises and things like that. And so over time, you're listening and you're hearing a lot of things and you're engaging with someone emotionally. And we often want to practice self-care, which is sort of taking care of ourselves. And I'll let Dr. Hansel and Dr. Glaude tell you a little bit more specifically. So what had happened recently was we were doing some work with some of the doctors and nurses and just doing some debriefing sessions. and you could just see the stress people were going through. And it wasn't particularly anything happened that day at the hospital, but it's just a constant going. And then I noticed with colleagues in some of the Zoom meetings, you know, you could see people just sort of not there, sort of checking out. And I was like, wow, we need to do something. We need a set of self-care resources. So I started searching the internet, and there's a gazillion places. However, there's no logical flow. So I worked with our communications director and the rest of our team at the school and developed a self-care resources website that's very simple, very user-friendly. It has something for everybody on it that's there. But more importantly, it's remembering to practice self-care. And I'll tell you why you need a self-care buddy. And if you don't like that term, whatever you need is self-care, someone that you can report to. Well, I was talking to our staff right before everyone went remote at home. And I said, well, remember to practice self-care. You're going to be out of the office. And somebody raised their hand and said, Patrick, I see you send in emails at 6 in the morning or 8 at 9 at night. And they said, what are you doing for self-care? And I literally was stunned. I paused and I'm like, oh, I've been called out, but in a good way. It was wonderful. I had been going just trying to make sure everyone else was okay, but I wasn't thinking about myself. It was just going like we all did, especially early on. And it was a great moment to say, okay, I'm going to meet with the staff every week via Zoom, and we're going to check in. And I said, from this day forward, I'm going to go on a run with my daughters, who are long distance runners, at least 3 days a week. And so I check in with them with a photo, sort of proof of what I'm doing every single week. However, that sort of is backfired because they want to run 5 to 6 days a week. And I wasn't built for that. So if you see me, if you live in New Orleans and you see someone struggling behind two strong runners, that's me. Throw me a bottle of water. I don't know what you could do. Social distance, just help me, because I honestly think they're trying to run me into the ground and get back at me for something. But I'll share the website after Tonya and Maurya share some things on self-care.
I like the analogy of self-care when we think about when you get on and you have the lecture before you get on a plane, before a plane takes off, and they say, okay, in the event of an emergency, you put your mask on first and then help others. And self-care is very much that concept that you really can't help others. You can't be strong for those around you if you're not tending to yourself and your own needs. And it's easy to put your own needs aside, but it's really important that you're looking at, you know, your physical, your mental, your emotional well-being, and making sure that you're doing things, even small things can be really important and go a long way, like going on a run or having a cup of coffee by yourself in the morning. Just something that you find that you can look forward to that can kind of help you manage the many stressors we're all under.
Definitely. I agree with everything that Dr. Hansel has shared. We have to care for ourselves as well as we care for others, and be mindful of checking on the strong friends we have, the people who are always, we can always count on. I think someone asked about guilt, and sometimes in our practice as mental health professionals, we take care of so many clients, so many patients, and we take care of all of their needs. And there's this guilt about not being on that front line, possibly experienced by other frontline workers, not being at the grocery store, not being at the hospital. There's this tremendous amount of guilt when you're given so much privilege and education that you have responsibility to serve others. And so in order to do those things, we have to be mindful of taking care of ourselves and filtering through what works for us. There may be some things that work for one of my peers or one of my colleagues that's not a good fit for me. It might not be culturally relevant. It might not be within my realm of spirituality, etc. So figuring out what's a good fit for you and using those tips and tools and filtering through what is suggested, filtering through what experts say is best practice. You have to figure out what is a good fit for you. And I think, to build on what Dr. Dean Bordnick said, finding that buddy, I call it my accountability partner. Mine is my supervisee. And if I'm modeling and teaching her best practice, I have to be practicing mindfully myself. And so each time we have supervision, we check in and she asks me, what did you do for self-care? And I ask her the same thing, especially during these times of uncertainty.
So I often tell people, and I'll share the website. You look, I had a good friend who's a stand-up comedian, and he and I were doing one of these things talking about self-care the other day. And he said, I got off Facebook, and there was a panel of like 200 people. And he said, I just felt so unaccomplished in my life. He said, I'm seeing these people and they're building an igloo in the backyard, or a pottery wheel for their kids, or they're, solving, cold fusion, just in their spare time. He goes, I had to turn it off because I felt horrible, right? And I just sort of said, well, people need to give themselves credit right now for just, if you got out of bed this morning, a little hint, I'm wearing a nice dress shirt, jeans, and I'm wearing slippers. So again, it's I'm totally out of sync here, right? But let's be honest, like everyone else on the call, if you get out of bed and just take on the day by just getting up, give yourself credit right now. I mean, there is so much stress, anxiety of just being a human being right now, besides having to do your job, besides having to do everything. And if you don't think it's a big deal, then ask yourself why you're feeling so tired right now. Human beings, biologically and behaviorally and cognitively, are not made to be in a constant state of anxiety. It's just, we're not built for that. And so that's why everyone feels so tired. And the other thing that, I told Maurya, I said, I'm going to take the weekend off and just not answer emails and chill. And she goes, yeah, just don't do anything. And I said, yeah, okay. Well, then yesterday I spent the whole day caulking and painting a room in our house. That's not self-care, that's home improvement. I was exhausted. So don't take over home improvement. Literally, if you get out of bed and you take on the day and call someone or just recognize where we're at, then you've succeeded right now where we're at. And so here, let me show, I'll share my screen and show the self-care website and talk you a little bit through it. Let's see. So if you can see my screen, this is, and I'll cut and paste the link for everybody out there, but this is the School of Social Work's site, and we have disaster distress hotlines up here, crisis help. If you click this will go to several national hotlines, just in case if somebody does come to this site and they're in pretty significant crisis, there are numbers that they can call, which are national numbers to help. But what we tried to do is make the website very simple, very easy to select, and offer a lot of choices. So under Meditate, those of you that are from New Orleans or know New Orleans probably know Terence Osborne, world-renowned artist. Well, some people don't know his spouse, Stephanie Osborne. She is a meditation and mindfulness expert. So we know that people don't have hours to practice mindfulness and all of that sitting there. So we had Stephanie build the school 9 to 15 minute, let's see if it loads here, mindfulness videos. You can do these on your cell phone, whatever, and each one of them has a different piece, but maximum of 15 minutes. So you can practice this. And we thought about doctors and nurses in between a difficult shift, or right when they get off, or on a lunch break, or any of us, social workers, public health practitioners. You could pop one of these on, and she did this for our school, and we worked with her on this. So these are easy. And she's also been doing, I think on Wednesdays with the mayor's office here, has been doing, I think, an hour-long meditation. So Stephanie is just great, very calming, but that's one of the immediate resources you can access. If you go under the Get Moving button here, we have all types of resources. Obviously, we talk about, Maurya talked about getting out, fresh air. Tonya said the same thing. Campus recreation, if you click here, this highlights a lot of our stuff here at Tulane. There's all kinds of virtual exercise, things that you can do, a lot of free stuff out there right now. So you can actually practice. One of the cool features is this all trails, because everyone wants to get out, but you may not know of trails in your neighborhood, or maybe one of them's crowded and you don't feel comfortable. So you click on this one, and you literally, wherever you're at, you just put in, I'll put in my zip code, you put in your zip code, And this will tell you on a map and also show you length of different trails, wherever it's at, all across your zip code. So you could find something, whether you're going to take a pet out for a walk, go running, whatever you want to do. It's something we can all access. And then on the side here, here's a free app. We wanted things to not have any advertisements or anything like that. So it's a lot of public resources. Here's a free app that can help you through some yoga and some stretching and things. Connect, which was highlighted earlier by several of us. How do you connect with people? Obviously highlighting Tulane, because we are the best at doing these things. Here's how you can, if you don't know how to use Zoom, here's some things on how to do Zoom, tips for keeping uninvited guests out of your Zoom. The one thing a faculty member shared with me, Dr. Broussard, she loves New Orleans, loves getting out, and was having a really difficult time when we were talking. And she said, well, you know, Zoom happy hours or Zoom get-togethers are one thing. However, it just is boring after a while. And I went to one or two of these Zoom sort of get-togethers, and there was all these awkward pauses. Now, we're all clinically licensed. As therapists, you're used to silence and awkwardness. It happens all the time. But I was like, this is really bad. I said, you got to be able to do something during these Zoom calls to engage. Well, this is an app. We don't own it, but apparently someone told me, I think Ellen or whoever had this, you put this on your phones and you literally play a game. And Dr. Broussard said her and her friends were on Zoom for 3 or 4 hours playing this game together, all interacting and having a good time. Other things, a lot of people are cooking. I'll call out Dr. Hansel on this one. She posted the other day on Facebook a loaf of bread she created. It was a work of art, so now it's become a challenge. I keep presenting different works of art that she needs to create on top of the bread. But here's recipes from the Goldring Center for Culinary Medicine. This is some coloring pages, and we're going to be adding some more. These are free to download, coloring pages, as you go in here from Walking Man Studios. And then let me go back to the next one. So this is my favorite one, indulge. One thing we often forget about is doing something that we don't normally do. And like I said, it's not home improvement. I'm sorry, Maurya, that I did that instead of indulging myself, because cleaning this room and caulking it was not indulging myself. But we've listed a lot of things you can take. Google has, we just sort of pulled things together, over 2,000 museums you can tour virtually. So whatever it is, from science to the Guggenheim, around the world, you can sit with family, alone, whenever you want. One of these museums has a penguin that will walk you through the museum and kind of guide you along. We've got cultural landmarks. This one is Frank Lloyd Wright. A lot of the curators of his homes recently have started doing these online tours for people. So this is a link to show you some of the tours. If you're an architecture buff, you can go there. Obviously, New Orleans, we are going to have music and art. So here is the OZ gig calendar. You can go on here and see whoever's doing gigs in their house, all through OZ. I'll kind of go along. NPR live sessions, all the tiny desktops, all here in one thing. American Roots. One of our faculty at Tulane does American Roots, Nick, which is a great site to hear about jazz and other music. Not everyone may have access or can afford Netflix or other things. So here's a free link. You go to stream movies with your library card. Then, of course, we have a lot of Tulane's digital libraries and resources. And working with Monica at the museum, the Newcomb Museum, here's all types of art things, a tour of the Tiffany windows they've just done, where they just walk you through the Tiffany windows. So great ways to connect with people doing different things. The one thing down here, these are some of our staff, and this tells you different things they're doing. And so you'll see at the bottom of a lot of these pages, we have a little button that says make a self-care suggestion. If you're doing something you like, we'll put your name up here if we list the thing and do a little quote from you about what you're doing. So there's an interactive piece. This is one that we're working on. We thought it was important to hear from artists and musicians. And so I came up with this crazy plan to just start contacting people I know, record a 1-minute video just talking about what you're doing, whether you're an artist or a musician, and we're building this and we're adding folks. So alumni out there, if you know of well-known musicians, this is my shameless plug, please have them contact me. They'd love to hear from them. One of the people you've heard from recently is Terence Osborne. He was on CNN. He created the painting, Frontline. So Terence, actually, I gave him a call and said, could you paint online? Could you do a little video and just talk about self-care? So he gave us this exclusive video of him actually painting part of Frontline and talking about the picture and what he's doing. And he said to me, he goes, Patrick, do you think people really want to watch me paint? I said, Terence, I watched a 2-second video of you painting and I immediately checked out and just got a sense of happiness. I said, yes, they do. And he got it. And so we're adding more things. Here are medical clowns. This is more for kids and family. They sing a song about COVID and washing your hands. So we're going to be adding more things on here as we kind of go. Here's VR art. But yeah, if you hadn't had a chance, this video with Terence, he created the Frontlines poster to honor the frontline workers and is now giving them away to healthcare professionals to honor their work across the board. So I'll stop there so you can explore this website whenever you'd like. But it just has something for everyone. So please contribute. Please, if you know folks out there that are well-known artists that may want to record a video, they would love it. People would love to hear from it.
That's fabulous, Patrick. We're getting a lot of nice feedback in the chat. We did put the link to the site in the chat, and we'll send it out in our follow-up email as well. So all very good. Do either of the other panelists want to comment, or should we get back to some of these questions? Because we have a lot, and we'll try to get through as many as possible, and we'll respond to the ones we missed today after. Maurya or Tonya?
No, there's a ton of questions, so let's get to
Okay,
answering
yeah.
what the people want.
One of the ones I thought might be good, because we touched on it earlier and a few questions have been coming in, is how to handle the news of the day. I'm seeing some anger responses maybe, and a very natural reaction, of course. And how do we handle the stress of watching the news, or some folks that want to open the economy when others feel that that's dangerous to do so?
Regarding handling the news in moderation, you could pick a couple of times a day that you want to watch the news and see that you are aware of what's going on. We're recommending that you consider if watching the news before bedtime would interrupt your sleep. So that might not be a good idea to watch it right before bedtime. With children and youth, being mindful that constant exposure, like if you have the TV on and there's constant streaming of what's going on with the pandemic, that is not healthy for youth. They need some predictability, and they need it censored through you so that you can help keep the environment stable. So in moderation, if you pick a couple of times a day, that's some things that my clients are telling me is working for them, where they may watch the news in the morning and they may watch it late afternoon, but not before bedtime. But you are the expert on your body. But research is supporting that in moderation, that this exposure should be limited.
You know what, another thing that's coming up is, what about the front line that might be experiencing, you know, a lot of trauma right now? And I'm sure we have a lot of social work graduates, alumni, it seems like here, but others of us have friends or who are doctors or nurses. How will that very important group of people handle all of this trauma?
I think it's, when you think about a pandemic or an infectious disease, every time we go to the doctor, right, let's say you've had a surgery. Well, the doctor or nurse comes in post-surgery, they're not wearing a mask, they're not wearing gloves unless they do something. So normal infection controls don't apply here. So it's not routine for a doctor and nurse to just be walking the hospital wearing an N95 mask or gloves the whole time, unless they're doing a procedure with you, or unless, you know, there's an infection there. So it really places a great deal of stress on frontline workers, whether you're a social worker. I've never had to do social work with a mask on until the pandemic, which is a totally interesting, it's a new thing for me, and I don't have all the playbooks for that. But I think the doctors and nurses and what they're seeing, not only working long hours, And you'll hear from them with the PPE shortages that so many of us heard going around. That is extremely stressful. You know, going against your better clinical judgment, having to reuse PPE, having to do things. And it's not looking to blame someone. It is total contrary to what you know how to do for infection control. And all the doctors and nurses that I've worked for, you know, I cried several times just hearing from them. I said, why don't you just walk away? I said, you're putting yourself at great danger and possibly your family. And they said, I love my patients. I have to be there for them. And let that sit for a second. And that is a true dedication to your craft and what you're doing. That's what we do as social workers, public health practitioners, and doctors and nurses and other healthcare folks. It's really managing that. But what will happen on the backside of this is this stress will eventually catch up to some folks, and it will manifest in several different ways with some negative outcomes. It's not saying, hey, everyone's going to end up with these things, just like PTSD we hear in war fighters. We don't know who's going to get PTSD. We could have two war fighters experiencing the exact same explosion or event, and one develops PTSD, the other one doesn't. We still don't know all of the specifics. So I think all the docs and nurses and the families are under tremendous amounts of stress, not only just from the daily part of their job, but coming home, trying to figure out, how do I come home after a day of work? You know, when I enter the house, do I take off my shoes? Do I take off this? How do I do this? And I think it's being kind to one another and acknowledging that we need to support all our health professionals now and post-event, because I think we're going to see huge rates of increased chronic and traumatic stress, anxiety, depression. When you're at a high, you're doing this, you're just on operation mode, let's get things done. But eventually that will go away and this will level off. COVID will become like a seasonal flu. I'm not a medical doctor, but that's what I'm hearing. However, the mental health and behavioral health effects are going to be much more than COVID ever affected around the world. And I'll let Tonya and Maurya share some of their thoughts on that as well.
I'm very hopeful that we're hearing a lot of discussion around these are the heroes coming out of COVID are going to be our healthcare workers. And why I'm hopeful is that type of rhetoric usually transitions to funding, and that funding will hopefully be available on a national level that can really address many of these concerns with individuals that were on the front lines. And for those that do have continued problems or longer term problems, that will have resources available to help.
I think y'all touched on this. I'm sorry, Dr. Glaude, did you want to jump in?
No.
Okay, all right, because I think y'all touched on this, but one of the questions is about the PTSD and should we be worried about it? We talked about it with the healthcare workers and the first line responders, essential workers. What about run-of-the-mill people? Is that something we need to be worried about as this goes on, and how do we prepare ourselves or look for signs?
I don't know that I would use worried. Are we mindful and are we conscientious that this could be an outcome? Yes. I, like Tonya, am hopeful that we as humans, as resilient beings, will be able to draw from our inner selves and use the resources that we as humans have. We are built to handle stress. We are built to handle levels of stress that we might not even be aware that we're capable of. So we as the helpers are not in any way saying that people won't be able to handle stress. We're saying if you're experiencing secondary traumatic stress to the point where, as someone who cares, someone who's compassionate, that this stress is beyond your threshold, yes, services are available. Telehealth services are available. Friends who might be able to help you put in some coping mechanisms in place are available. Yes, we are mindful that we may have increases in needs for services, and therefore funding and programs will be important, and hopefully those will come out of the need, and that through us providing normalcy for communities that people can get back to living and get back to using their coping mechanisms that are internal to them to handle crises. People are experts of their own bodies. And so being mindful of that, being able to say, you know what, this is beyond what I'm used to, and reaching out for services is important. And also knowing that you have these inner abilities, you have these inner strengths to handle stress. So some of all of that, yes, we're preparing. Yes, we are ramping up to be able to respond, and hoping that the programs and services will be available, and that we also understand that people are resilient.
Some of the other questions, unless any other panelists, y'all jump in if you want to, or should we keep going? We'll keep going.
I think one thing, Jenny, that was mentioned, I think I saw it, and I don't know if we hit on it, was further up in the question stream. And again, it gets to this stress and anxiety in a lot of the mixed messages we're hearing. And those of you that know me, I'm not political. I don't speak about politics, but I can speak to the fact of hearing mixed messages out there, whether it's, you know, reopening of the economy is the latest thing for the last 6-8 days, right? Is that good? Is that bad? We obviously want the country to get back, and the rest of the world to get back to where we were pre-pandemic. Things will be different, obviously, going forward, but I think it's listening to the experts and doing what's in your heart and what you feel is safe and comfortable for you. There is no right thing saying, hey, do this, do that. And look at science. Science has yet to fail us. You know, listen to the experts, whether it's CDC or WHO. Those are both organizations that are designed to protect and support people across the board. And if they're saying, hey, if you go out to the grocery store, wear a mask, and the reasons why you're wearing that mask and what you're doing with it, and don't let it be just a fail-safe that, you know, I'm Superman or Wonder Woman now that I have a mask on, you know, I'm bulletproof from anything. That's not really the intent. But I think it's following good guidelines from the doctors and nurses. And I think don't get wrapped up in Twitter and all the other rhetoric that's going around. I mean, we all want to be able to go out to eat. We're in New Orleans for crying out loud, right? Just going to our favorite restaurant, or, you know, walking down the street without having to, you know, do the old zigzag around people. We all want that across the country to go back. But I think let's do it safely and listen to the folks in science and let that guide you in. You can't fix what's going to go on in the future. Control the things you can change right now in your own life. What you can do is wash your hands. You can obviously practice social distancing. You can give yourself credit for just, I'm going to say this another time, just getting up in the morning. Give yourself that permission to say, you know what, damn it, I got up today. That's a great thing to do. Because how many times, I'm not old enough to have lived through the early 1900s pandemic. Who knows what it was like then? We do have a lot of really good things that we are locked into our houses that we can access. It may not be going out to your favorite restaurant. Merrill in New Orleans is one of my favorites. However, I can sort of, you know, find a recipe that Merrill has posted online and try to cook it at home. I wasn't able to do that in the early 1900s. It's not saying that what we're not experiencing isn't real, but I think start to give yourself credits if you're a parent at home, right? And you're there with your kids or your pets or whatever. Mine, we just had to put up the dogs because I muted. They were barking at, I don't know, Amazon or somebody coming down the street. I don't normally have to do that in my office during the day, but I use humor a lot. I just laugh about that. And if you guys heard my dog in the background, welcome to the pandemic is my sort of thing. It's not normal. I don't want my dog barking, but I sort of give myself permission that odd things are going to happen. Or I did move my computer because I didn't want you to see the clock and ladder that's in the room that I'm talking to you from now. But I think just give yourself time and follow what the scientists are telling us to do and stay out of the news and the media and all of that. And I tell people I don't watch the news anymore. It's not because I don't want to be informed. I stopped watching about 10 years ago when it was a beautiful sunny day and the weather person came out and said, this is an ultraviolet event. I was like, I'm done. I can't, you know, on a sunny day, yes, wear sunscreen, absolutely, but it turned into a crisis rather than a beautiful sunny day. I said, this isn't news anymore. It's not Walter Cronkite when I was growing up as a kid. It's turned into something else. And I'm sure Tonya and Maurya have some thoughts on that as well.
Well, you just dated yourself with the Walter Cronkite reference. I think
Vince, remember the running with two teenagers down the Nutrigon and me laying there in a heat? I've already dated myself, but thank you again, Tom.
I would say with media, one of my things is when you start hearing the same information over and over, that's if you want to stay connected, I think it's a really good thing. But if you start hearing the same thing over and over, that's your cue to turn the station, or you know, look elsewhere for more relevant news, like the CDC website, which is a really good. The Center for Disease Control is a great website to get kind of current information about the pandemic that isn't filtered through kind of sensationalism.
I think there are a lot of people who want to get to your website, which is very nice. You know, that's a nice alternative, it seems like. I do want to make sure we get through some of these, and we talked a little bit about teenagers earlier, but there was one comment, very poignant comment about their teenager missing senior year, or relatives who are being affected by this, really key moments in their lives not being able to happen because of the pandemic. And if you have any advice for, I would classify the grief affiliated with that.
So be creative. We have no control over when we'll be able to come together again. Some ideas that I've seen, people are using TikTok and they're creating videos where seniors are engaging with one another and having this virtual graduation. People are having Zoom parties. People are having Google Hangout parties. So in these times, we have to be creative. I actually saw a graduation where people had a car line. It was almost like a car parade, and the graduate was standing out in the driveway, and the parade of cars drove by congratulating the graduate with posters, etc. So recognizing this accomplishment and giving credence to this accomplishment and being creative are the best ideas that come to mind. This is an important time in our young people's lives, keeping them connected and helping them engage with their peers to celebrate until we can come together. Reminding them that we will come together and celebrate. And in this time, let's be creative.
That's lovely. Love that. We're going to run out of time. And so I'm going to let y'all each have a final word in a minute. But there was one comment, you know, the society will open up again. And there was some comment about the stress that will be involved in that. So I'd love your thoughts on that. There also was a comment about someone interacting that other family members weren't taking the social distancing as serious. So I suspect as some people start to go back to work or go back to their lives, we're going to be dealing with that stress.
Yeah, I think one of the things is to give yourself permission to mourn and feel, you know, that we're not who we were as a world pre-pandemic. That doesn't mean we've changed and become something totally different. I see a level of humanity of just people waving. New Orleans is friendly no matter what, but the amount of neighbors that I've met at a safe social distance over the last month and a half is astounding. I think we've come closer together as a community once we stopped, you know, plugging into everything. As I'm talking, as we're on Zoom now. But no, I think you have a lot of that. But I think mourn some of the things you did. If it was, you know, a graduation or something like that, acknowledge, yes, that does feel bad, that I can't have that. However, as Maurya said, look for unique ways to have something that will be something only you'll be able to have, right? This could be, you're the student that graduated during the pandemic. You know, you'll always remember that, good, bad, or otherwise, but also give yourself credit that you got up today, you graduated during a pandemic, which that is a huge feat, just dealing with having school online, going through all of that. Those are huge accomplishments. You graduated, everyone else pre this Didn't have to graduate with a pandemic going on. Give yourself credit for that. Don't forget that. And I think really just give yourself time to look forward. Things will get back to a different normal, whatever my life's never going to be normal. It's just me. But I mean, give yourself credit to go back to what it can be and understand. And with people that are not practicing social distancing or whatever, again, like I think Maurya and Tonya said earlier, you can only control your behavior. I can't control whether my neighbor wears a mask or whether they, try to walk up to me or whatever. I can't control that. What I can do is control myself and my family members' actions by doing everything we can at this point. And I think that's important. Remember to control the things that you can control and stop trying to think you can control everything else. Because as a parent of 3 teens, I gave up controlling things a long time ago.
Any other thoughts? Go ahead, Maurya.
I was going to say my last comment is actually in response to one of the questions and also a little humor my daughter shared. So continue to reduce isolation, build community. Someone brought up suicidal ideation after Hurricane Katrina. Reduce isolation, build community, have an accountability partner or buddy like the dean talked about, and really, really, really emphasize self-care. And kind of like what Dr. Bordnick was talking about, my daughter said her generation, my daughter's 13, she said she can't wait till she hears her child or her nieces or nephews talking about boredom. She said, y'all can't talk about boredom. We lived through the COVID-19 where we stayed in the house for however many weeks. We're at week 6 now. So she said, I don't want to hear boredom. So I just thought that was a little humor, like when we talk about walking through snow 6 miles, living in Southwest Louisiana or Southeast Louisiana. So have a little humor and reduce isolation.
Dr. Hansel?
Yeah, I think the whole emphasis on self-care is really going to shape what this looks like post-COVID, and what you can do and what practices you can start now, and checking in on your friends, checking in on, as Patrick had talked earlier about, people stressors post-COVID and post-pandemic.
And Dean Bordnick will give you the last word.
Oh, that's a lot of pressure. I'm not sure I can have that much pressure. No, again, I'll say this the 3rd time. So usually 3 times it takes for people to actually listen. When I say something, it's going to just be me. No, again, give yourself credit for the little things. If you logged into this call today, that's a big thing. That's a step in the right direction. Please, the Selfcare website, we designed that for no other reason than to provide a place for people to access the Selfcare resource website. There's not ads, there's not anything else on there other than to log in, to get things to do, to practice, to give yourself just a brief pause during your day and practice self-care. Do what we all said. Find yourself an accountability person. And I wish everyone well and safe. And if you are in New Orleans and you see me running down St. Charles, please help me. The kids are going to run me into the ground probably, but no, it's me practicing self-care. And if that's a good reminder, that's why I'm out there. No matter how tired I am, I'm out there doing it because it's over and above. Give yourself that time to connect with others, to connect with yourself, and to indulge a little bit right now. Thank you very much for
well, I will just say that I actually will take the last word, which is really to thank you all. You are fabulous. This has been so helpful, and you've given us resources that we can take throughout wherever this leads us, let's just say. There was a question that came through on the chat that people were finding the website to be password protected, and I don't think it is. So just anybody who's having any issue, we will watch the chat. We will save the chat. So if we missed a particular question, we'll get back to you. And if you have any issues, we'll have some follow-up information that goes out so you'll know who to contact. The one last thing I want to say is that we have our next plug-in event on April 29th at 5 p.m. And that will feature President Fitz and Walter Isaacson, who will be interviewing John Barry about his book, The Great Influenza, the story of the deadliest pandemic in history. So if you want to sign up for that, that's at alumni.tulane.edu/plugin. We want to thank everyone for joining us and hope everyone has a terrific day.